What if one day you woke up and you realized you had been missing something? You realized you had been missing something for a long time, something important, something that could empower you in a very meaningful way and empower you not only to get more of what you want in life, but to help others do the same. And then what if one day two podcasters came along and said, you never did lose it? It was there all along. I'm Ryan Montes. I'm with Alana Banks, and this is the No Excuses podcast. I think it's the best podcast that there is, and I'm just basing that on no criteria at all other than my own opinion. Anyways, I'm here with Alana Banks. Alana Banks, what are we talking about?
We're talking about one of my favorite topics, which is intuition.
Ooh, intuition. There it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Love it. Why I love this topic is because a lot of people don't think that they have it. Many people think that intuition is for people who are psychics or people who are tarot card readers or people who read crystal balls, when in fact, we all have it. We've all been born with it, and it's something that we just lost along the way.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's unfortunate. That's unfortunate.
Very
okay,
unfortunate.
So before we dive really deeply into blowing people's minds and telling them where in their house they can go and find their intuition, it's been behind the toilet this whole time. Before we give them that secret, what is intuition? Let's define it.
Yeah. So for me, intuition is that really familiar voice inside of your head that, sometimes is telling you to turn left when you're walking straight, go and, maybe bring your umbrella out when it's like a perfectly sunny day. It's that voice that sometimes doesn't seem logical, but totally makes sense in hindsight when you go back and connect the dots. I can also describe it as like your inner voice, that like higher voice that's inside of your head that is pushing you to do something that is maybe a little bit illogical, but it really makes sense and it feels good. It's for me, it's almost more like a feeling than it is like a logical message.
Yeah. I think, and I agree with everything you're saying, I think a good metaphor for intuition is one of the things that used to frustrate me in elementary school, especially in math. I used to be really good at math. I used to be able to, especially like prior to high school, like normal elementary school math, I used to be able to do stuff in my head, and it would get me into trouble because I would look at the question on the page and write down the answer, and I would get it wrong because I didn't show my work, right? And yeah, and to me, intuition is like when you get the answer from deep in the depths of your mind and it's not showing you the work, so you don't accept it. It's like, here's the answer. I'm not going to tell you how I got to this. It's not important right now. And you're like, and then your conscious mind is like the salty elementary school teacher that's like, no, that's wrong. I don't accept that until I know how you arrived at that answer. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's actually one of the things that's trained into us, at least it was into me. And metaphorically, maybe that impacted, how I communicate within my own mind. But intuition, for lack of a better metaphor, is the answer without showing the work.
Yeah, I like that. And, you touched on something that's really important is it is almost conditioned out of us, right? We come into this world knowing exactly what we need. We have all of the answers inside of us, but we are taught to not listen to that voice because we're taught to do it this way, especially when it comes to the school system. No, this is the way you're going to do it, or, this is what I want you to think about. And we lose our intuition because, it's basically conditioned out of us, and we learn not to trust that gut feeling, that inner voice, that thing that's going on inside of our head. And then as a result, we lose it. And then, it's really difficult to kind of get it back because you've lost that trust with yourself.
Yeah.
And it can be very disempowering, right? And so, for example, even with children, they may have a very clear idea of what they want to do or how they want to do something, or like you were saying, the way you were, doing these math problems. But when you're constantly telling the child to go and do something else and you're silencing that inner voice within them, that's a very disempowering thing to do. And I always, I have two kids, and recently we all had COVID. And, especially when my kids are sick, I always let them go with their intuition. And I never force what makes me feel better when I'm sick onto them. Right.
Mhm.
So if they specifically need something or want something, I let them have it. And I don't force them to eat something or drink something that maybe they don't want, because I know that inside they know exactly what they need in that moment to make them feel good.
Yeah.
A lot of parents, though, or many parents, may have a different idea, right? They may say, well, this makes me feel better, so I'm going to give it to you. And then that just kind of causes problems for the child. And it's a disempowering way to deal with their own intuition.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a fun example, an extreme example, would be like mom or dad smoke a pack of cigarettes a day. And when they stop smoking, they feel bad, right? Well, what will make me feel better? A cigarette. That doesn't mean when little Johnny says, oh, I feel bad, that mom and dad say, oh, I know just the remedy. What makes me feel better?
Yeah.
Tobacco, right? So anyways, that's just a silly thing that came up in my mind. Okay. How do we get it back? How do we get the intuition back?
So how you get it back is really starting to listen to yourself and just maybe doing small things. So, listening to that voice in your head that says, wear that instead of that, or, go right instead of left, or take this turn on your way to work instead of that turn. Like, those are really easy ways to start leaning in to that inner voice that you have going on. Well, here's an example. Okay. I want to say like a year ago, I live in Toronto. We were going to High Park, and I said to myself, I think we should ride our bikes. But, my husband wanted to drive. So we drove. But I had this feeling, I knew driving to High Park was just going to be a nightmare. But I was like, okay, whatever, we'll drive. Anyway, it ended up, there was like traffic. We couldn't find parking. Like, it was just a total gong show getting to High Park, finding parking, getting there. And the whole time I was like, I knew we should have just ridden our bikes. It would have been so much faster to ride our bikes. So that's like an example of like not going with your intuition and everything kind of like falling apart. And I don't know, maybe I'm jumping ahead a little bit here, but it's like when you use your intuition, generally it leads to a positive result. It's going to lead to something empowering, something good, something that's going to work out in your favor. When you go against your intuition, it could result in, something disempowering or negative or not working out the way you wanted it to. So when I think of trusting my intuition or leaning into it, I have evidence to prove that when I listen to my intuition, it ends up working out, and evidence to support that when I don't, it often doesn't go the way I had hoped.
Yes. Agreed.
Yeah.
And I like that. And what I would add is a couple of things. First of all, before I forget, intuition, everybody, has been scientifically studied and proven to be a real thing. So you can Google this, you can see the research. There's this classic case study where a race car driver was whipping around the track and he was coming up to a blind corner and without conscious thought stopped suddenly. Without warnings, no flags up, nothing like that. A move that could have, really set back his progress in the race, in the standings in the race. Only to discover that around the blind corner was a massive accident, and he would have crashed right into it had he continued on, right? And so, as part of the research, scientists analyzed the video, interviewed him, looked at all the details, and they realized that there was a minute difference when he was going around the blind corner and the accident was on the other side of it versus the other times, the other laps that he had done. And the minute difference was the energy, the movement, and the head positions of the audience in the grandstands. Now, this driver is focusing on what he's doing, the gas, the brakes, the steering wheel, the road, thinking about the angle of approach on this corner. But unconsciously, he's getting a sense through his peripheral vision of the crowd, right? And there's no time to consciously analyze that. It's not even possible, but his unconscious mind was paying attention. And this is what I mean when I say you get the answer without showing the work. The unconscious mind didn't have time to communicate there's something different about the crowd. The energy is off. They're not looking at you when it just sent the message, and he felt his foot hammer on the brake, right? That's one of my favorite examples of intuition. And what it will say about intuition and empowering yourself to accept information from your intuition is when somebody gives you good advice, don't tell them to F off, because the good advice stops coming. If you have a kind mentor in your life who's constantly looking at your situation and giving you little tips and hints from a place of love and wisdom, well, if you say thank you each time they do, the tips keep coming. If you say, shut up, you old kraut, or what, I don't know, whatever you would say to this hypothetical person, guess what's going to stop happening? They're going to stop helping out. So, intuition, in my opinion, and in my model of the world, is a little bit of a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets, and you need to respect it and build that rapport between the conscious and the subconscious.
Yeah, definitely. And the more you listen to those nudges, the more you're going to get confirmation that when you listen to those nudges, things work out in your favor. And then the more confidence you're going to have, right, about like going after those feelings, even when they're not logical. And I love that example too that you shared, because I've heard that one before as well. And it really is, it does come down to energy, and it comes down to a feeling more than like a knowing. Right? It's like when you walk into a restaurant and you get a bad vibe, and there's something inside of you that's just like, let's not go here. Right? Or you meet someone and you just immediately get a feeling about them that is either negative or positive. Like that is your intuition kicking in. That's like feeling something on an energetic level. And I know that kind of sounds woo-woo and weird, but we are all energy. Like that's all we are is like the little bundles of energy wandering around. And your intuition is that immediate feeling, that unconscious feeling that doesn't make sense in the moment. But like I was saying, when you connect the dots later, it all kind of makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. So in other words, trust yourself, listener.
Yeah. Trust
podcast
yourself.
Listener. Trust yourself. Starting right now. Trust yourself.
Yeah.
Cool.
And you can do all kinds of little exercises to help trust yourself. Just taking a day and saying, I'm only going to listen to my intuition today. I'm only going to do the things that I'm getting. And how do you know? This is another really important thing, but how do you know when it's your intuition and it's something else? Right? That voice inside of your head. The way I like to describe it is to say, like, does the voice sound like you, or does it sound like someone else? Right?
Yeah.
So it could be a voice in your head that sounds like a parent or, a friend or a partner, or it's like this voice coming that's actually yours, maybe your higher self. And the way I've heard it described before is like, if it's your ego, it's usually a voice that is going to give you something. Whereas if it's your higher self, it's going to have some sort of like, not positive thing, but it's going to be for the greater good. It's going to be like it's going to be helpful in some way.
Yeah.
So it's like you might get some sort of message coming in, and if it's only about like to make money or like make you richer or something like that, then chances are that's your ego talking. Whereas if it's coming from your higher self, then it's most likely going to be better for the greater good or better for you. It's just going to be a fuller, richer kind of a voice.
Yeah. Cool.
What about you? How do you hear your intuition?
I think I'm all about easy. I'm all about path of least resistance. The way that I developed mine was I just started, like, every time I had something, an idea come into my mind, I first decided to get out of the habit of demanding to see the work, right? To go back to this metaphor, right? Where the answer would come up in my mind, and I'd always like take time to be like, okay, how did I arrive at this answer, and start weighing pros and cons. And like, and then it would turn like which chocolate bar should I get, Snickers or Mars bar, into like a 45-second thing in my head. And I realized this is just such a waste of time. The first thing that came up was Snickers, buy Snickers, and trust the intuition, right? And you can apply that same formula to whatever thoughts come into your mind. What's the meal what's the restaurant we should go to? What's the course I should invest in? Whatever. And here's the thing, just, accept the thoughts that come in and take action. And through a natural process of trial and error, you'll hone in on what are really good intuitions and what are, intrusive thoughts masquerading as intuitions, and just let it develop naturally. At least that's what I did. And now life is easier because I'm requiring so much less conscious thought and just trusting that my unconscious or my subconscious mind, my intuition, my higher self, call it whatever you will, has already done the work on my behalf. And it's working out great. For those who know me know I live a decent life, right? I tend to get what I want, right? And a big part of that is self-trust, right? Mm-hmm.
Big time. Yeah. And I think that's what it kind of comes down to, is when you start listening to your intuition and you start saying yes to those pings or nudges or whatever you want to call them, then you really start to live a life where you're getting what you want all the time, because it's just sort of like this ripple effect. It just keeps working. And I know now when I go against my intuition, everything just falls apart. And so I know now that it's just like not even worth it to not listen to my intuition, because the more I listen to my intuition, the more I get what I want. However, I'm going to say it can feel very uncomfortable, because sometimes your intuition is pushing you to do something that consciously, I guess, you don't really want to do or feel comfortable doing, or, maybe it's pushing you out of your comfort zone a little bit. So, that's where things could also get a little bit scary, and where you may not listen to your intuition too. So you have to be also really aware of that. But I think, that's just your higher self saying like, you can do this, right? Yeah. Because you're not going to go somewhere that you're not ready to go.
Yeah. Yeah. That gives me an idea for a whole other episode.
Awesome.
By the way. There's a can of worms in there just waiting to be opened.
So maybe we should just wrap up there.
Yeah, I think we got it. I think we got this one. Intuition. It's in the garage behind the snowblower. Just go grab it. It's always been there. It never left. And start using it. Make friends with your intuition. Yeah. And it will serve you.
And one of the best places you can listen to that is when you're doing something that requires almost zero thought. So when you're in the shower, when you're driving, when you're blow drying your hair, that's when I get a lot of my intuitive pings. And that's because your mind is at ease in that moment. So, listen to what's going on in your head when you're doing these mindless tasks, washing dishes, unloading the dishwasher, driving. Yeah. Really listen to what's coming in and ask yourself, could I do that?
Yeah. Right? For me, it's jogging. When I go for a jog.
Oh, that's another good one.
I tend to solve all of the world's problems just in my head, because it's just enough physical activity to occupy the conscious mind, just enough. And then, the unconscious mind can start revealing all the mysteries of the universe one at a time. And it tends to happen.
Yeah. Also, write that stuff down. So open the notes app on your phone, have maybe a journal that's just available. That's what I do. I get these ideas and then I write them down, because oftentimes I'll forget them if I don't write them down. So I write them down and then revisit them and, don't think about it, right? Because these sort of intuitive downloads that people like to say, these are your best ideas oftentimes. Yeah. And the ones that are going to push you further ahead to take that action that we were talking about in the last episode. So take responsibility for your intuition.
I love that. Take responsibility. Stop ignoring your GD intuition, everybody.
Yeah.
Step up. Cool. All right. I think that's going to cover it for today. Alana Banks, pleasure as always. By the way, where do people find you?
You can find me at Alana Banks Coaching on Instagram, and I will be having a website soon. I'm just getting a new website created. So alanabanks.com will be my website. So stay tuned for more info on that.
I am at Ryan Montes NLP on Instagram, ryanmontes.com. That's going to be it for today. So everybody, this is the No Excuses podcast. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for listening. And we shall see you on, well, not see you. You shall hear us on the next one. Thanks, everyone.